Impossible. Absurd. The man's mad. These were the words that greeted Amy Felix Schiffley's decision to ride 10,000 miles from South America to North America, from Buenos Aires to Washington, D.C. in the late 1920s. After a 2.5-year journey, he was feted in both the USA and Argentina, where he remains a folk hero to this day. In the Americas, his 2 horses are equally famous, and although they both died some time ago, it is still possible for the curious to see them. On their deaths, they were skinned and stuffed and put on display in the Argentine National Museum of Transport. There, Mancha and Gato stand ever staring through the side of their glass cage, placed between a Ford Model T and a seaplane. These horses and this man, Schiffley, were the inspiration for my travels around the world on horseback. Why is the question asked most modern-day travellers. Why? What's the point? Answers such as, because it's there, no longer satisfy, however pertinent they may remain. Why not, is the answer I usually give. I travel the world on horseback because I want to. This is the most honest answer I can find. In this programme, I will be trying to share the pleasures and joys, as well as the trials and tribulations of travelling the world on horseback, sometimes alone, often with my wife Karina. Many thousand miles ago, I started in South America, riding on through Japan, Southeast Asia, India, Pakistan, and into Afghanistan. Finding the right horses on which to travel always takes time. In South America, I took 2 slow months to pick my horses from the variety that I saw. Too many horses, and the decision is agonizing. And too few, the search becomes extended and difficult. This is the first horse I bought, Viento Norte, translating into English as North Wind, came from a farm outside Buenos Aires in Argentina. A criollo horse, the horses originally of Barb and Arab stock, taken by the Moors to Spain and by the Spanish to South America to aid them in their conquests of the subcontinent. He is a perfect example of the tough, intelligent workhorse of Argentina. With stocky legs, good front and hind quarters, and standing at about 14.2, he carried me in conjunction with my second horse, El Chapaton, from the east to the west of South America, from Argentina to Peru, across the Andes. We travel, we that is referring to my horses and myself, about 25 to 35 kilometers a day. Sometimes we ride more, sometimes we ride less. Sometimes we don't travel at all. The distance between towns, the availability of fodder, and my own gut feeling are all factors in deciding the rhythm of the journey. The journey is not a race, but a chance to become part of the environment. weather and climate are also important factors in deciding the rhythm and pace of the journey. When the temperature reached 50 degrees centigrade plus in the Indian Gangetic Plain, we could only ride in the very early morning and would be finished by 10:30 a.m. It was dangerous not to be under cover during the afternoon. It once hailed several centimetres of marble-sized hailstones in 30 seconds in Pakistan. Torrential rain can create different problems. To find my way along the route that I prepare initially by country, then by region, and each night on a daily basis, I use two forms of navigation: A, map and compass, and B, asking people directions. I once asked someone how far it was to the nearest village, and the confident reply came, 100 degrees centigrade. Knowing what type of saddle to use and how to place it against a horse's back is one of the most important skills. I rarely use a pack saddle. In fact, I will go to almost any length to avoid using a pack saddle. If man, saddle and pack can all fit onto one horse, a second horse, if you have one, is completely free of any burden and can mosey along behind with nothing on its back apart from the sun. Although it may walk some distance, it is relaxed and fit and ready when required. When I started riding for the first time, I set off with 35 kilos of equipment. I had a library of books, Walkman and tapes, camping paraphernalia, and every other manner of excess and unnecessary baggage. The pack saddle meant that I had to saddle 2 horses in the morning. If I wanted to take the saddles off in the middle of the day, as I like to do, I had to take 2 off and resaddle twice. I was spending my whole time sorting, packing and saddling. I refined my kit so that 35 kilos became 3. Now all I carry are my cameras, my diaries, veterinary kit, a small medical kit, and my shoeing equipment, which consists of nippers, a hammer, a hoof knife, a rasp, and spare nails. I do all my own shoeing as far as I can myself. Firstly, the skills of local farriers in many parts of the world are very poor, and I prefer to trust my own jerry-rigged job rather than someone else's. Secondly, when a shoe comes off in the middle of nowhere, the nearest farrier may be up to 1,000 kilometers away, so there is going to be no outside help in any case. To save on the weight in my saddlebags, I often carry mustard plastic shoes that can be either nailed or glued on. They are probably the first development in horseshoes for 1,000 years, since the Romans first started nailing metal shoes onto horses' hooves. In my experience, the very best material that you can have against a horse's back is sheepskin. Wool side down, soft, flexible, able to absorb sweat and washable. It is a material as close as can be to a horse's skin and fur, and therefore a very good medium on which to place the artificiality of blankets and saddle. The space between the saddle and the horse's back should not be ignored for storage purposes. A variety of thick padding materials, usually blankets, are required to absorb the weight and friction of saddle and rider, doubling up as bedding and horse blankets for cold nights. When I'm carrying a tent, I also put my tent under the saddle, making sure that the zips are not going to press into the horse's back. On top of all this, I put a corona. It's a thick leather numbner whose purpose is to spread the weight of the saddle and rider across the horse's back. Then the saddle and last but not least, a thick, fluffy sheepskin to make sure that I never suffer from saddle sores myself. This saddle was made specially for me by the leading saddler in Argentina. An excitable man, he was showing me the variety of saddles that I could use and became so excited that he started to cough and his false teeth flew out. Obviously used to this, they were caught by an assistant and placed back in the great man's mouth so that he barely paused in his spiel. As we ride through, we stop and rest, not just for comfort's sake, but to explore some of the world's less visited provincial towns, which can offer great architecture and beauty, as well as giving a window into how people are living their daily lives. The markets are often central to people's economic livelihood, and we need to become involved, not just as observers, but to peruse and buy the supplies we need for ourselves and the horses, as well as sampling the local foods and drink. My haggling skills have been toned over many years of argument in the world's markets. So often we would be welcomed into people's houses, and they would go to the bother of cooking special meals, treating our visit as an excuse for a party. This man was kind enough to light the bread oven, usually a weekly event, so as to ensure that we had fresh bread that night. As is the custom when having a party in Argentina, he also provided 1 kilo of meat per person that night. I often carry in my saddlebags dried meat, as it is nutritional and lasts well. These butchers were preparing churkey, dried llama meat. On a long journey, the dried meat is kept under the saddle against the horse's back, so that the salty sweat keeps the meat well preserved. One of my staple snacks is the raw egg. When I'm doubtful about the hygiene of the food, I can be pretty sure, whatever Edwina Curry says, that the contents of an eggshell will be free of any contamination. As there is often no way of cooking the egg, I prick one end with a nail, make a larger hole in the other end with the nail, and suck the contents out. Raw eggs are delicious and taste just like fried eggs. Here in Japan, I'm eating noodles with both raw egg and seaweed, the green strip floating on top. And here Karina is eating grasshoppers cooked in sake and sugar. Only very, very rarely have I carried food for my horses, and I never carry water for them as the quantities required and ensuing weight are prohibitive. I feed them the best that I can buy, and over the years they have eaten barley, maize, pulses, wheat straw, rice straw, alfalfa, chocolate, beer, tea, and thousands of biscuits. Often we are helped by people who give us food for the horses. In Malaysia, even the army pitched in to cut fodder for them. The most dangerous animal that I've encountered on my travels is not the spider, the snake, or even the tiger, but man. The night before I rode out of Bolivia and into Peru, a taxi driver was taking me from the slaughterhouse where I'd stabled my horses for the night. "So where are you going, senor?" he asked. "To Peru," I answered. "Which way?" he asked. I told him. He took his hands clean off the steering wheel and holding an imaginary machine gun in his hand said encouragingly, "They will kill you." they referring to the Sendero Luminoso terrorists, who had already killed 5 tourists that year. I did not fancy becoming another number on the fatalities list. Well, he was wrong about me being killed, but the time that I spent in terrorist-controlled country made me more continuously frightened than I have ever been and hope I ever will be. It was mad to have travelled through that area, but there were places that I wanted to see. I was helped because at the time the only road was impassable to vehicles. Therefore, there were only 2 ways through, on foot or on horseback. And as I was the only one with horses, I had the advantage. My horses performed superbly. We travelled for about 2 weeks, covering 80 kilometres, 50 miles or so, each day. And this was at heights in excess of 17,000 feet above sea level. I know of no better endorsement of the strength and courage of the Argentine criollo. They had another test to face. It took 3 days to drop from the mountains to the relative safety of the coast, but the temperature rose from -10 degrees to +40 degrees centigrade. We followed the burning sands for several months, hopping from one irrigated valley to the next in search of water. I've been frightened by man, but many times I've been terrified by the elements. One particular night, Crino and I were camped on the Isla del Sol in the middle of Lake Titicaca. We had left the horses on the mainland. It was a beautiful, clear evening, and we had cooked on a campfire overlooking the lake towards the high Andes. We went to bed in our tent, and the weather was calm and still, perhaps too calm and still, as at about 2 o'clock in the morning, we heard the faint rumblings of a storm, and soon it was raining hard. We were snug in our tents and sleeping bags, listening to that wonderful sound of rain on the tent roof. The thunder rumbled closer, and a little while later still, we were no longer so relaxed. The storm seemed to be right over us and was engulfing our tent in a barrage of thunder and a light show of forked electricity. We just thought that the storm had moved on when there was a most almighty explosion. The next morning, we looked out of the tent to see that this tree, no more than 15 meters away, had taken the full force of the lightning strike. No, really, the only trouble I've had with the natural animal world was the time Carlica, my Indian horse, was charged by a water buffalo on the Delhi equivalent of the M25. Sometimes it's not the terrorists, insurgents, or anti-establishment groups that are the problem, but the authorities themselves. The Equestrian Federation of Japan told us that it would be impossible for us to ride through Japan. They said that there were no suitable horses, no feed, too much traffic, too many people, nowhere to stay, and last but not least, nowhere to dispose of the droppings. Luckily, we were just able to gain the assistance that we needed. My maxim when dealing with the authorities has become, it's sometimes easier to ask forgiveness than to obtain permission. Most of Japan is made up of mountains that when I first saw them reminded me of walls with broken glass embedded along the top. The only way to cross Japan was to scale the mountain ranges that separate the valleys in which most of Japan's population and industry are concentrated. Where you have people, you have cars and houses and factories and lorries, all enemies to a man on a horse. I was forced to scramble up and down the winding footpaths that bisect the Japanese Alps, often leading my horse Cash within a few centimetres of large drops. Once we were away from the built-up areas, we could travel along the valley floors, sometimes into tunnels punched through spurs falling from the mountains above. I put reflective garters on Cash's legs to warn a few cars of our presence. There are, of course, special moments, days that are more memorable than others. We were riding through the end of the monsoon in India, and on the advice of a friend decided to visit a mela. So we have arrived at a mela, it's a place called Muratganj. A mela is a fair of horses, those are ours, and ponies, which there seems to be a lot of here, and water buffalo. The proprietor of the mela welcomed us with open arms and erected a tent for us right in the middle of the action, where we received an enormous number of visitors. We tethered our 2 horses just outside and wandered about the livestock and stalls, which had a wonderful range of goods, selling everything from sweets to household products to homeopathic remedies. Cattle, goats, buffalo, horses and sheep are on show and on sale. The Muratganj Mela not only boasted livestock, but also all-night dancing girls. One of the most extraordinary experiences we had was when we swapped horses for an elephant in Kanha National Park in India. The day was made when we took the elephant down to the river and swam with her. Although I carry a full veterinary kit with antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, analgesics, local anaesthetic and sutures, homeopathic remedies can also be extremely important. In Japan, my mare Cash escaped from a makeshift grazing corral and fell into a bog one day, leaving herself very, very lame. A man living locally had seen what had happened and produced a bottle of urine-coloured liquid and some feathers. He told me to paint the liquid onto Cash's leg, which I did more to humour him than because I thought the liquid had any medicinal properties. Amazingly, she was sound in the morning. I asked a vet friend about the medicine. Mamushi medicine, he said. What is mamushi medicine, we asked. Snake medicine, replied the vet. Cash had been cured by a homeopathic snake lotion. The vet gave us the recipe, which is not for the faint-hearted, but which I'd like to share with you. Mamushi snake medicine. Ingredients: 1 bottle, sake, water, and 1 mamushi snake. It's the best we could do. Directions. 1, catch the mamushi snake. Take care not to be bitten, as the snake is extremely venomous. 2, put the snake into the bottle. 3, fill the bottle with water. until there is just sufficient space for the snake's head. You don't actually want to drown the snake. Put the top on, punch some holes in the top, and leave it standing for 30 days. Note, do not feed the snake. After 30 days, this one we did before, 30 days ago, drain off the water. This is where it gets nasty. Fill the bottle with the snake in, with sake. And this time, I'm afraid, you fill it right to the top, therefore drowning the snake. Fill that to the top, right? You leave it standing for 30 days, and after 30 days, it's ready. The resulting liquid can be applied externally or taken internally. Tastes sort of musty and snaky, to treat most ailments known to man. Make sure that you refill the bottle with sake after each dose to ensure an ad infinitum supply of Mamushi snake medicine. The use of homeopathic remedies is, of course, common in many cultures. When riding through the northern heartland of India, we stopped at a tea shop in a small village, and I noticed that one of the men had a clump of leaves poking out from his pocket. What is this? What are these leaves for?
That is for asthma.
For asthma, really? And you eat this?
Yes.
In a...
Just chew them.
Just chew?
And the essence will go inside.
Really?
And the cup will come.
And the name of this?
Tulsi.
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 Tulsi. Tulsi. Tulsi. He gave me some to put in my saddlebags, which I put back on Karlika, and we rode on to continue the day's journey. Mountain travel began again in earnest in the northwest frontier province Pakistan, bordering with Afghanistan. We were climbing over the Luwari Pass and towards the Hindu Kush, the natural border between Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. We were spending our last few days on roads populated by vehicles, and were heading towards the mountains beyond, to the Wakhan, an area that few Europeans have visited. I felt greatly honoured to have the opportunity to ride there, although I knew that there would be very little food, and I was unsure if I could travel with both my horses due to the problems of handling them both in the terrain. Today is the 28th. And the little horse had to leave behind in Chitral, which was annoying. But everyone says around here it's better to travel one man, one horse. So tomorrow I'm going towards Rogul, and then hopefully to the Wakhan Pass and to the Oxus. But there's no point taking this camera because the electricity runs out. So I'll see you when I get back. The track to the Wakhan along the Yarkun River is pretty inhospitable, at times no more than a few centimetres wide with a big drop. The river is crossed by narrow little cantilever bridges called Palilians, meaning insect bridge. The bridge is probably the most dangerous for a horse. One option is to wade across. I did cross a number with my brave Punjabi horse Big Black. But the safest way was for me to cross the insect bridges carrying my saddle and equipment, which I would leave on the far bank. I then attached a long length of nylon rope to Big Black's head collar and again crossed the bridge. With the help of the drawer on the nylon rope, Big Black was able to swim across in relative safety. The scenery became increasingly spectacular as we continued to climb. At last, we dropped out of the Hindu Kush and followed a tributary down to the Oxus. The Spate was on its way, and with the snowmelt would come a block of water that would cover the mile-wide river floor. I crossed the river as carefully as I could. At last, we scrambled out into Central Asia. I camped that night, and each time I stepped out of the tent to fetch water, check Big Black or whatever, I was consumed by this intense excitement, provoked by the stunning scenery and the weather that would change from sunshine to storm in 5 minutes and back again in another 5. It was good to be there. From this region, there is a story about the horse. God created the horse as a spirited and free animal that would run swiftly across the plains with elegance and grace. It was a small conceit on his part, but he wanted to be able to look down from above and admire this part of his creation. But man also saw the horse and thought that it might come in useful for war, agriculture and transport. Through cunning and deception, man was able to catch the horse and hobble the animal by his front and hind legs. When God next looked down, he could not see the hobbles, obscured as they were by the body of the horse. All God could see was the horse hopping about as if crippled. "What have I done?" said God to himself. "I've made the most terrible mistake." "Don't worry, sir," said man to God. "So that you don't have to see the horse, we will care for the horse and build him a special house. We will call that house a stable. Well, we have stolen the horse from God and from the wild. We now have the horse in our stable, and now the time has come to fulfill that promise to care for the horse." The International League for the Protection of Horses, ILPH for short, is the world's leading equine welfare charity. For them I work as I go. The LPH has many roles, but I come in where we are trying to improve the conditions for working equines around the world. My job is to identify particular problems that face local horses, whether farriery, harnessing, feeding, breeding. The question of horse welfare is, of course, a huge field. It is not just a matter of teaching horse owners to treat their horses a little better, hopefully for both their horses and their own benefit. But to begin with, it is a matter of understanding the vast variety of factors that will affect a horse. These can be political, physical, economic, social, even religious. Because of the time I spend riding through each country I visit, I am fortunate enough to gain a grounding in these factors, so that in a secondary role, I can input to the programs that the LPH devises to curb horrendous cruelty, as well as improving the lives of many horses and the lives of those that depend on their horses for their daily bread. In Malaysia, horses have their throats slit, without the benefit of stunning, to comply with the strict religious laws of halal. In Japan, often the best cared for horses are those destined for the slaughterhouses. In India, Tonga horses, cart-pulling horses, on the street are increasingly having to compete with the introduction of mechanised transport, such as the motorised rickshaw. In many parts of the world, the horse is dying out because man, who has for so long relied on the horse for his military, transport and agricultural power, no longer needs the horse's services. I was glad to have been able to save one horse from an early death and ride him through Malaysia. The route we chose took us through the jungles to the north of the country, through an environment that is extremely alien to a horse. I was riding a beautiful animal called Golden Prince, who came with the annoying habit of stopping every 100 meters or so and refusing to proceed until he had been walked forward a few paces. To say the least, he was a strange choice of horse on which to ride across Southeast Asia. But the choice of horses was very limited, and I also knew that unless he could be improved, he was destined for the slaughterhouse. The reason that he had gone mad was that he had been kept in a riding school, alternating long spells of boredom in his stable with long spells circling a sand arena. The horse is a nomadic creature, which is one of the reasons that they so enjoy long-distance journeys if they are treated correctly. The journey is a way of life close to their natural state, travelling, resting, eating, travelling, resting, eating. Golden Prince loved the journey and thrived. I was not so lucky. I developed a small blister in my ear, which became more and more painful as the days went on. After about 10 days, I could bear the pain no more, and I asked Karina to pop the blister with a needle from the sewing kit. She heated the point of the needle over the flame of a lighter in a rudimentary attempt at sterilization, and then applied the point of the needle to the blister in my ear. No sooner had she touched the blister with the needle than the blister, in inverted commas, dropped out of my ear and scuttled away on little red legs. Not only have I suffered from beetle in the ear, but also malaria, amoebic dysentery, gastroenteritis in many forms, heat stroke, heat boils, giardia, and every manner of coughs, colds, sprains, bruises and abrasions, but generally have been pretty healthy. When tethering a horse at night, it is extremely important to make sure that the horse does not become entangled in its tethering rope, as a nasty rope burn can be the result. One alternative is to hobble the horse. The right type of hobbles, such as this pair from South America, are made from thick leather and will not chafe the horse's legs. Hobbles are basically equine handcuffs and are buckled round the horse's front legs, one on each, like so. The horse is then free to move at will, in a rather ungainly hopping motion, but it can graze where it likes. Be warned, a horse, even when hobbled, can travel several kilometers in a night. A tether should be 7 to 10 meters long. One end is attached to the horse's head collar, which should always be of the strongest leather or nylon, and the other end is attached to a suitable tree, rock or fence, which the horse, if possible, can circle. The area within that circle must be free of obstructions. But maybe there's nothing to tie the horse to. And this is a tip I picked up from a gaucho in Argentina. Take the stirrup from your saddle, find a suitable place, and using the stirrup as a spade, dig away into the ground. Use your hands as a shovel, really get in there, make it as deep as you can, Then tie the other end of the tether to the stirrup and bury it in the hole. Your horse is then anchored for the night. The end of a day's riding does not mean the end of the day's chores. First, the saddlery has to be taken off and stored so that stray dogs cannot chew the leather. Every day we groom the horses down, brushing the dirt and sweat from their coats, as well as checking them over from head to toe. We also apply oil to the horses' hooves, sometimes coconut oil, sometimes used car oil. Oil promotes hoof growth, as well as keeping the hoof wall healthy. I also check the shoes and clenches each day for wear and tear. With Karina on the trip, clothes washing has become a more regular chore. I once spent 6 weeks in South America in the same clothes. Samosas for us, fruit for us, and a few other things. I like to check the maps, reviewing that day's progress, as well as planning the next days with a vague idea as to where we are heading. The last jobs at night are to check the horses and to put their feed on to soak for the next day. I have stayed in many places, including potting sheds, an operating theatre, the bar of a bar, and schools. In one hostel that I stayed, there must have been 50 people in 20 beds, because the landlord charged by the bed rather than the head. So to save money, many doubled or even tripled up and shared the bed. One night I shared a room with 4 species of animal: cat, rabbit, sheep, and turkey. And another time, we found a snake under the stairs. One day, late at night, I rode into a small village in Peru. Being a small village, there were no hotels, no hostels, no official accommodation of any sort for the traveller. I asked a passer-by if he had any suggestions, and he pointed the way to the local priest's house, saying that the priest might give me a bed for the night and organise a place for the horses. At the priest's house, I dismounted and knocked on the door. A man came to the door, confirmed that he was the priest, that I could stay the night, and showed me a place for the horses. He told me that he was busy in a meeting, but that I should make myself at home, help myself to whatever I could find in the kitchen, and that he would join me when he was free. I took the horses off to the designated corral, watered them, bought them some barley and gave them some hay. The horses were settled, and I returned to the house and kitchen. On a journey of this length, the need to eat heavily becomes almost obsessive. In the kitchen, I found a kettle, tea, milk and sugar. I made a pot and drank 2 or 3 cups of tea. I also found some biscuits, butter and jam. I buttered and jammed the biscuits. I drank more tea. I was stuffing the biscuits into my mouth as fast as I could. The priest came through and we sat and talked while I could not keep my hands off the biscuits and tea. At last, I felt replete. sat back in my chair and sighed with pleasure. The priest looked up at me and smiled. In all my 30 years as a priest, he said, I have never seen anyone enjoy communion wafers as much as you just have. I know a few greater pleasures than riding through the countryside, even towns, on the back of a horse, travelling at the speed of nature, at a speed that allows true observation and feeling for the environment. If you have a horse, I hope that you are already exploring your local area, using your horse as a wonderful vehicle to new sights and knowledge. And if you don't have a horse, there are many organisations both in the UK and abroad offering chances to journey on horseback. So whatever your age, whatever your riding ability, get out there and ride on. And if anyone tells you that you are being mad or absurd, just ignore them, as Shifley did all those years ago.